My son and I were driving through Oklahoma City, had the radio on, and the guy comes on the radio, "Hey, anybody want any underage girls?"
One of the things that we saw that disturbed us quite a bit was seeing a van pull up with a woman driving, 5 or 6 girls that got out. It looked like they ranged anywhere from 15, 16, maybe 18 years old, but all of them very, very young.
This one, she didn't even look 13, 14 years old. She had no shoes on. She had a little mini skirt on.
She couldn't have been more than 14, 15 years old.
She probably looked in her 14, 15 years old. I really couldn't tell her age, but she was very young.
And I know good and well a 14-year-old, 15-year-old is not doing this on her own accord.
I remember looking into the eyes of some of these young girls. They were not willing participants in this at all.
I said, "I've got one question for you." She said, "What's that?" I said, "Why are you doing this?" She said, "Just look around the corner of the truck down there and you'll see that Cadillac down there. That's why I do it." And when I looked down there, I knew what was going on.
So you know there's some kind of team effort in putting them out there. You have to wonder who's behind them.
They have a pimp or whatever you want to call them, trafficker, slave driver, bottom line.
Sex trafficking is a form of modern-day slavery. It's when traffickers are using force, fraud, or coercion to compel an individual to engage in commercial sex. It also involves anyone who's under the age of 18 is considered a victim of sex trafficking, regardless of the use of force, fraud, or coercion. And this is an issue that affects all populations of victims: men, women, children, foreign nationals, and U.S. citizens. And it's really important that we understand that.
When most people think of the problem of child prostitution and sexual exploitation of children, they think of it as being a problem for foreign countries, for third world nations, and doesn't exist here in the U.S., and that's just not true.
Human trafficking is a local crime that is happening to your neighbor's child. It is a crime that is happening in your city. It is a crime that could happen to your child.
It makes me feel very uncomfortable because you know what, that could be my daughter.
To realize that this is going on in America is disturbing. That's, for a lack of a better word, it just disturbs me, it hurt me.
People do not realize how big of a problem this is in the United States. It is extremely pervasive. It's happening in every single state.
The youngest child that we've recovered has been 9. Average age is 13 to 14, possible 15 years old that they get involved in prostitution.
Nobody wakes up and says, "Gosh, I'd really like to sell myself on the streets today." That is something that is being directed by the victimizer, by the trafficker. And these kids find themselves in a situation they literally cannot get out of.
If you have adult prostitution going on in your area, you have child prostitution going on in your area. And it happens in a number of different venues.
And traffickers are not only exploiting the victims, but they're also exploiting these locations. Everything from commercial front brothels, to residential brothels, to hotels and motels, to truck stops, to street-based prostitution. A lot of exploitation is happening online. That's where a lot of the connections are being made. And these spaces are very diverse, and that's why it's so important to understand what it looks like in all of these different venues.
This needs to be stopped, and these young girls ought to have an opportunity to have a life. Their life is being robbed and taken away from them at such an early age.
It was me and my cousin Chrissy and my cousin Cody. We went in and asked my mom if we could go down and get some Frosties before dinner. And she said, yeah. Me and Chrissy's walking, and that's when the Lincoln pulled up.
Your pimps that do exploit these children and get these children involved can come from any background. Your pimps are your individuals that will look for vulnerable kids.
I think a lot of times people think about traffickers as one bad person who grabs a kid and somehow sells them on the street. But what we found in law enforcement is trafficking is often a team effort. It's the person transporting the child from place to place so that they can never be in a place long enough to get help. It is the person who actually lures the child in. It's the enforcer, the person who is beating the child. Could those all be the same person? Absolutely. But more often than not, it is a loose coalition of people who are working to keep that child enslaved.
And if we're looking at victims of sex trafficking, we're talking about specific forms of vulnerability. For example, someone who has a history of abuse or trauma. It could be someone who doesn't have a good social network. So we're talking about runaway and homeless youth. We're talking about individuals who might be here, they might be undocumented, they came from other countries with promises of some different type of work. So it really, it's not about a single type of person, but rather vulnerabilities that traffickers know how to exploit. They're very savvy, they're smart business people, and they know exactly what to be looking for.
This is old-fashioned greed. And where you can only sell a drug one time, you can sell a girl or a boy or a man or a woman over and over and over again.
We ended up going to his house, and that's when it pretty much hit us like a ton of bricks, because he wasn't nonchalant about it or anything. He just shut the door, locked it, and said that we're not leaving. And he sent Chrissy upstairs with one of the girls and me downstairs in the basement. I was freaking out because I didn't know what was happening to Chrissy. They separated us right then and there, and pretty much what the girl that I went downstairs told me, is that I was going to do what Derek told me to do, which they call daddy.
What the pimp culture and psychology tries to do is they try and take the place of the father figure or the family figure. They refer to their victims as being their family or their folks. And that's what they call one another when they're with their victims. Now, when a pimp talks to another pimp, he refers to them as their stable. And that's how they really are looked at. They're looked at as livestock. They are to be sold and traded. Girls never get any of the money. That's, a big myth is that they're allowed to share some of the money. They never are. All the money goes to the pimps.
We would have to have sex with men for money, and we had no say about it. And I started freaking out. I was crying, and I kept saying, let me talk to Chrissy. Where is she? Then I got to see her. She was totally in tears. She was freaking out. I guess they had said the same thing to her. And she was my best friend, and I didn't want nothing to happen to her, and they already said from the beginning that if I did anything stupid, then she would be the one that would pay for it.
When the girls don't want to work, they're beaten. In extreme cases, we've seen them drugged, addicted to heroin and things of that nature. It's a brainwashing that begins in a dependency that the pimps try to put on the girls so that they cannot live without them, and that this is all that they can amount to and do.
From the beginning, I wanted to get out, but there's bars on the windows, the alarm's on every window, every door, everything. They never really left our sides at all. One day I did try, and we made a run for it, but he was up. I guess he wasn't sleeping. I don't know if he was just mind games or what he was doing, but he grabbed us. He threw me into the dining room table. It was glass, and busted me up pretty good. But Chrissy, he dragged up the stairs by her hair, like all the way by her hair, and threw her down the stairs, and did it again like 3 more times, busted her lip up, got her bruised, black eye a little bit right here. And it was really horrible to hear her screaming for me, and the 2 girls were holding me back and, telling me that, I have to watch this, that this is what happens if I try to do that, that I made it happen, that it was my fault, I should have never, tried to leave. And just seeing her flying down the stairs, it was pretty bad.
I'm hard pressed when I hear people say that, well, some do it willingly and want to do it willingly. I don't think anyone would really want to be beaten and raped on a daily basis and beaten in the most extreme ways. Violence goes hand in hand with these type of cases, and it's used to break down the girls. It's used to discipline the girls. It's used to gain complete control over them. So I don't think there's any real willingness of your victims, especially their child victims.
And here we are, you know, I'm 15 years old, my cousin is 14, and we're here at a truck stop, you know, being forced to work it, you know, being forced to go from truck to truck, asking, you know, if the guy would like to have sex with us, you know, and we're young girls, terrified out of our minds. This is somebody's family member, you know, that is missed, you know, you don't think of that, you know, that they don't want to be here. You know, at the truck stop, we were not together. She was God knows where, you know, and I was over here. I didn't, you know, one phone call saying, hey, she's acting up, or hey, she's trying to run, or she's trying to signal a truck driver that, you know, that something's wrong, she's not acting right, and something could have happened to Chrissy, you know, or vice versa. From the very beginning, they drilled it into my head, they drilled it into her head that, you know, if we try to act up, something really bad was going to happen. I mean, you couldn't see it on the outside looking at me, you know, you couldn't see that something was wrong, you know, but deep down in my eyes, you know, there's something wrong. You know, I was crying out for help, but I couldn't do it because, you know, I didn't want to end up dead. I didn't want her dead and it be my fault, you know. I mean, it's like they had us completely wrapped, completely controlled, you know, to where we were brainwashed, to where we were like, okay, we have to do this or else, you know, something bad could happen. I mean, who knows if they knew us well enough, they could have known where my family lived, you know, and killed them, you know, anything. Anything was going through my mind that, you know what, I have to do this or else something bad's going to happen to me, to my family, to my friends, anything, you know, and it's not something that you really see out on the surface, but it's happening, you know, inside my mind it was happening, you know. I was scared, unbelievably scared.
Threatening one's family, a lot of times what they'll do is use that to threaten against the girls that, you know, I'll kill your family if you don't do this, I'll kill your mom, I'll kill your little brother, I'll kill your kid. Sounds unrealistic, sounds crazy, like something on plot for a movie, but it is happening. I've seen it happen in more than one of my cases. And we get reporting back in the field that it happens. It's a common occurrence that will happen, threatening other families. The trucking industry is in a unique position because they actually will be in locations that pimps will bring in their victims to be prostituted out. Pimps are very transient. They move around a lot. So do your girls. Your victims are being moved constantly, whether it's through planes or cars that they'll just drive, or bus tickets, or through trucks. Any way that they can get to their money, that's how they're going to get there.
Truckers Against Trafficking is a grassroots organization. It comes alongside the trucking industry, recognizing that they're the eyes and ears of our nation's highways. They're in places that most people aren't, and that they can recognize potential victims of human trafficking more than the rest of us. And so we equip them with tools that they can recognize, identify potential human trafficking victims, and then a number to call, the national hotline number, 1-888-373-7888, so that when they see human trafficking situations, they can report those and hopefully get the victims recovered and perpetrators arrested.
The partnership between the hotline and Truckers Against Trafficking has been really exciting. As soon as this campaign launched, we saw a significant increase in calls about trafficking cases that were not being reported before this population was learning about the issue. Now you're talking about a really highly trained group of individuals that are seeing trafficking, they know where to report it, they're reporting it right away, they're often seeing it while it's happening. And so it's even an earlier intervention and action point than a lot of the other cases that we're getting. And as a result, we have seen countless investigations. We've seen countless victims who've been recovered by law enforcement. So this is just, it's so important that this population knows what to recognize, knows who to call, and feels comfortable doing that.
So signs to look for. The most important one is if you ever see a minor selling commercial sex. By federal definition, that is a child, that is a victim of human trafficking. There is no such thing as a child prostitute. But it's not just minors who are being victimized here. We're also talking about adults who are victims of the sex trade.
So where your truckers can help out at their rest stops, they know who's coming in. You see a car pull in or a navigator pulling in. Why is a navigator pulling in with 10 girls in it and one guy behind the wheel? And all of a sudden you've got a bunch of young girls walking out in revealing or lingerie clothing.
So if you're in a parked location and you happen to see lights that are flashing, perhaps signaling that somebody is saying, I'm an available buyer, that should be a red flag. If you happen to hear CB chatter about commercial company or somebody needing to make a quota or somebody referencing their daddy or that boyfriend figure in their life, or if you're that local driver who is loading at a business front and you happen to see that unaccompanied minor or that minor who looks fearful or potentially is under the control of somebody else. What about branding? Do you see some tattoos claiming ownership over this person? This is a potential sign that you are interacting with a human trafficking victim. We've had cases come back from drivers already who are having conversations with people and asking questions like, are you traveling by yourself? And if they're not, who are they traveling with? When's the last time they've seen their family? Do they get to keep any of the money? Are they free to come and go as they please? These are important questions because they're going to help you determine whether or not this person has the freedom to walk out the door or not. So traffickers are continuing to exploit businesses for criminal gain, and they don't care where it is, whether it's that major sporting event or a big convention that's coming to town, or it could be a casino. Wherever it is, they're going to go where they can make money.
Everything from hotels and motels, commercial front brothels, to residential brothels, to street-based prostitution, to truck stops.
Those are locations that potentially those spaces could be exploited by traffickers. If you're in a bus terminal, this is a place where potential victims could be recruited out of. The more you look, the more you'll find. So what should you do in these situations? Well, first and foremost, make the call. We need you. We need the person who has identified the tip to first make the call. Call the hotline, 888-373-7888.
This is a 24/7 national hotline for victims and survivors of human trafficking and the anti-trafficking field.
It's always details, details, details is what helps us. If you can, simple things that you can note, what's the vehicle, the color of the vehicle, the make of the vehicle, description of any occupants, the girls, how many, race, possible age that you think it may not be.
You may not know if it is a trafficking situation. You may see something that feels a little off, or that person feels like they may not have control over what's going on. Call the hotline. We're there to really help you assess that situation, to talk through next steps, to talk through options. And if it is a tip, or if you do have information, make sure that we're connecting with law enforcement and service providers on the ground who are trained on trafficking, who are victim-centered, who know this issue and know this work.
If you can get a license plate, what state, what the plate is, that's fantastic. If you can get a description of who's driving it, who's in control of it. If you can take pictures say 1,000 words. And if you have a camera or an iPhone, whatever it might be, that's a fantastic piece of evidence and piece of information that we can use.
If you call our hotline, you can remain completely confidential. Confidentiality and anonymity are very important to our callers, and we take that very seriously. It's okay to be wrong. We want you to call whether you're sure or not. If If you don't make the call, we may not be able to connect that victim with help.
And if you are in a location that has a general manager, go in then and tell the general manager. They need to know what's going on their property, wherever you are, wherever you're parked.
You know, it's getting involved that much. We're not saying go out there and grab the girls and try and drive away with them. Now, don't try and rescue them on your own, but even the smallest kind of little details that you guys have that can provide us with would help, and have helped to recover girls.
So Truckers Against Trafficking seeks to be very intentional in its partnerships. The trucking industry is 7 million strong. And so we work with national and state trucking associations. We work with large and small carriers. We work with local, regional, over-the-road guys. We work with the truck stop and travel plaza community. We work with the trucking schools.
So the more you have transportation industries that are committed to this issue and really thinking about creative ways to help, the better we're going to be able to facilitate that connection from, you know, moving someone out of a trafficking situation.
And when we talk about the coalition building that we're doing between key industry stakeholders and law enforcement who investigate trafficking cases, we're talking about loopholes that are getting closed to traffickers that were once they were able to so easily exploit. And that's a huge part of what TAT does, bringing the trucking industry and law enforcement together to put these guys out of business. They have operated unfettered for too long, and it is enough.
Every one of these kids that are recovered and saved, what you have to remember is you're preventing hundreds of rapes going on. Every one of these guys that we arrest, that's preventing hundreds, if not thousands, of kids of being raped and abducted.
When we talk about the progress that's been made, it's just pretty amazing to watch one industry step up and say, yes, we're going to be proactive on this. And we see drivers being trained, and we see safety directors deciding to implement this, and CEOs of companies, and we see truck stops who are saying, yeah, we're going to put this information out for the drivers that visit our locations, and we're going to train our employees. It's fantastic, all of the different ways that the industry has decided, yes, we're going to own this issue. But we got to continue to reach the entire trucking industry. But imagine what will happen when we do. And then think about this. What if every taxi driver was trained? What if every bus driver was trained? Every gas station employee along our nation's highways? Every oil and gas worker where boomtown effects happen? What if we could train all of these armies across the United States to identify and recognize human trafficking and report it immediately when they see it? Where are the traffickers? What place are they going to have to go? Trucking has got this started, and that's why I say when we talk about who's driving change in this area, we have to talk about the American trucking industry.
This is working. What you're doing has been working, has had a significant impact, and we're so thankful at the hotline that we have this partnership.
There's 2.4 million CDL drivers in the United States. We need to educate them about what we're talking about right here, human trafficking. We can make an impact. We can change everything that goes on out there by getting involved.
Thank God what saved me was that truck driver that called in and said, hey, you know, this is whoever at the truck stop, you know, and we have some girls out here that look pretty young.
911. A couple of girls that picked up 167 trying to do business out here.
Because this trucker made the call, I have an opportunity to actually have life. Without what he did for me, you know, a simple phone call, without that, you know, it would have been total opposite. But here I am, I'm sitting here with my mom, you know, I mean, and that all could have been taken away, but because of, you know, that trucker, I have, you know, a future.
Oh, that trucker. The one that made that phone call. I think about him all the time. I have never met him. I don't know who he is, but boy, I owe him a lot. And if he ever sees this, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Get on your cell phone. I mean, you know, get the TAC card, get the hotline number, call, and if it's someone in trouble, and the cops will show up, it's going to give them a chance to come clean with what's going on, maybe get out of the situation that they're in. So, you know, call the hotline, go inside, tell the management of the truck stop.
I think it has to stop, and I think it's going to take us drivers stopping it and reporting what we're seeing and taking action instead of shutting our curtains and hoping it goes away. I am a team truck driver with my husband, Bob.
I've been a 16-year veteran of over-the-road truck driving.
I've been driving for 26 years.
And I am a trucker against trafficking.
And I'm a trucker against trafficking.
I'm a trucker against trafficking.
I am a trucker against trafficking.
My name is Andre, and I'm a trucker against trafficking.
And I am a trucker against trafficking.